So first of all, let me say thank you all so much for being here today, and I am so excited to be here with you. I thought about it, we looked at some slides, I thought about how to come at a conversation starter with you all, and then realized I was in San Diego. So I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories ever about an experience that I had some years ago. And it's going to seem completely irrelevant to talking about evolving yourself in your career to serve. But I'll come back around at the end, and hopefully it will be evident why I told you this story. So many years ago, I was invited to speak at the League of Women Voters at a breakfast meeting. At that time, I lived in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I was relatively young in my career in pharma, and I was so honored to get this invitation. So I gladly accepted, made arrangements. On the day before the breakfast, I finished all my meetings, headed to the airport in Indianapolis, got on the plane, everything was running smoothly. We pulled out just on time from the gate and then sat on the tarmac for 3 hours. Couldn't get off the plane to make other arrangements, so there I sat, knowing the entire time that I was about to miss my connect through Denver to San Diego. So, of course, we finally take off. I land in Denver, and, of course, I have missed my connect. So myself and about 100 other very unhappy people stood in line at the service counter to try and find out what our alternative plans could be. By the time I wound through, I had thought of all kinds of alternatives and good questions that I was going to ask when I got to the desk. Basically, they were like, I'm sorry, ma'am, there are no other flights this evening that would get you there for your breakfast talk in San Diego tomorrow, but we can get you there late tomorrow afternoon. Okay, so that's not going to do. So I started asking questions. Well, is there another flight on another airline that might be able to get me there? No. Is there a flight on another airline or this airline that might get me close enough that I could drive from wherever that is to this? No. What about if I rented a car? I don't know, how far is Denver from San Diego? Anyway, if I got a car right now, I drove all night long, could I make it? No, you cannot. So all of my great ideas were dashed, and I got handed a coupon to spend the night at the airport hotel and $9 for dinner. So I'm like, okay, first of all, $9 for dinner. You can look at me and see that's not gonna work. And I don't want to be at the airport hotel. I need to be in San Diego. So I asked all these questions. They were like, ma'am, I am so sorry. We have all these people. Could you please take this stuff and step aside? So it turns out that I wasn't going to make it for my talk, so I had them finally reroute me back to Indiana. I was going to head, kind of pack it all in, head to the hotel, call the organizers and let them know I'm not going to be able to make it, and then I was going to go back home. Just as I walked out, at the very last minute, I said, let me check that blue board again. And I looked up, and there was my flight to San Diego flashing, boarding. I was like, oh my goodness. Anybody been to the Denver airport? Okay, Mile High City, mile long airport. So I'm dressed kind of like I am today, had a little business suit on, had some pumps on, right? Okay, so I'm gonna make it. It's at gate 59 or whatever it is. It's a long way away from where I'm standing looking at this blue board, but I'm going to make it. So I start running with my little roller bag. I'm looking around. Everybody had packed up and gone home, so there wasn't anybody to help me. But I'm running. So now I had to take my shoes off, so I take my shoes off. I'm still running. I finally see a woman who's standing over on the side. She's doing something behind a counter. I don't stop moving, but I hail her up. I don't know who she is or what she does. And I say, please, call gate 59. Tell them I'm coming. Don't take off without me. She gives me a nod, and I'm running on. I get down. The door is open to the jetway. This is pre-9/11. The door is open to the jetway. I push the door open. I go down, they're literally closing the door. I get down on the floor and I'm telling the flight attendant, I gotta get to the, I'm telling her my story. She pulls open the door. And I have to pause here and tell you the sight that she saw. So first of all, somebody laying on the ground trying to tell her a story about how they need to get to San Diego. But then second of all, my hair was all over my head. I was sweating. I had taken my shoes off and my little knee highs were pulled down around my ankles. So I was just looking a complete sight. So I tell her my story. She says, wait a minute. she goes and she comes back and says, okay, give me your ticket. So, right, I don't have a ticket anymore because I'm now rerouted back to Indianapolis. So this is what I did. And she said, why don't you just take the first available seat? And I made it to San Diego. So, why did I tell you all of that? So I told you all of that because I realized that there were some lessons that I had learned through other means earlier in my career. There were ones that I've used since that experience, and there are ones that I'm using right now that I think might be applicable to anybody here, whether you're in high school and trying to figure out where you are, or whether you're later in your career and trying to figure out what you'd like to do next. So let me share those lessons with you. So the first one is, you have to determine your own destination. All the people that said they were willing to help me, and were, the people who were at the customer service, the people who were standing behind the various desks, they said they were willing to help me, but they really didn't have the investment in where I wanted to be. They were okay if I was spending the night at the airport hotel. They were okay if I didn't make it to that breakfast the next morning. I needed to know where I wanted to be and when I wanted to be there. And without that, the day may have ended very differently. I had a really important lesson that I learned before that from a colleague. And I kept asking him, what should I do next? What should I do next? And he finally, in frustration, because I was harassing him actually, he finally in frustration said one day, you're asking the wrong question. The question is where you want to be last, not next. And I said, oh, that sounds kind of ominous. And he said, well, let's call it something else. So we named it the pinnacle role. So where do you want to be eventually? Where's the point at which you are going to have the greatest possible impact and the deepest possible satisfaction? And he actually sent me on some assignments. He said, why don't you do research on people that you believe are doing the things you would like ultimately to do? And then research them, and if you can, interview them and ask them 3 questions. The first question is, what do you actually do every day? Like, what do you really do every day? The second is, what do you love about what you do? What is the impact that you have? And then the third is, what frustrates you? What do you not like about what you do? And collect that information. So he put me through these paces. It was fascinating. I actually interviewed people that had jobs I would never have thought that I wanted to do, or involved in careers that I never thought I would want to be involved in. I talked to my CEO. I was 10 minutes in, I was like, oh no, honey, your job is safe with me. Because he did things every day I wasn't sure I would really enjoy doing. But I had to admit, the impact he could have was intriguing. And so in my research, I found roles that had a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but ultimately landed on 4 or 5 things that I sat back and thought, you know, if I ultimately was able to do this, I think that would be a point. I could just keep doing this for the rest of my life and loving every minute of it. And so determining your own destination, whether you're using what Sandro taught me as a process for helping you figure that out, whether you already know what your passion is and understand what that's going to look like for you in those 3 dimensions, doesn't much matter. But know that unless you know where you want to be, chances are you won't get there. The second lesson, you don't know where your help is coming from. There is someone, I am certain, called the gate, had them hold that door, made it possible for me to sneak down that runway, right, or that jetway, and get on that plane to where I needed to be. I don't know what she does for a living. I don't know her name. I didn't have an opportunity to thank her. But it taught me for sure, You can never judge in advance where your help is coming from. And so your network, open and free, is an important way to approach it. People have connections and information that you may not consider relevant. If you're close to it, you won't have the benefit of it. So opening your network and making sure that it's not redundant, which in science and medicine, it often is. So you know people who know the same people that you know. If you actually map them, these redundant networks end up, right, kind of cycling the same information over and over. And many times these kind of interesting and exciting opportunities come from places that you would never imagine. That having been said, I believe that it's important to have a group of people, I call them my board of directors, that end up having different roles and different skill sets. I have role models. These are people that may not know me, but that I know and that I've studied carefully. They can be close up and I can be watching them in meetings and in their work environment. They can be far away and I'm following them by looking at articles about them or tracking with their work. So role models, I think, for me today still remain very important and always have been. Mentors. We talk a lot about mentors. I have a very specific definition that I use around mentors. Mentors for me are people who know my heart. They are willing to push back on me. They're not cheerleaders. Oftentimes they're uncheerleaders or cheerless leaders. I'm not quite sure what to call them. But they're the ones that kind of don't mind hitting you right between the eyes with hard feedback that's shape-shifting for you, or to give you insights into your kind of thinking that you weren't aware of. My husband is one of my best mentors. My parents before him, aunts, uncles, neighbors. These are people who have kind of tracked me my entire life and know me well. And I'll give you an example of the clarity that mentors can give you if they're willing to be honest with you. When I was transitioning from my academic environment into the pharmaceutical industry, honestly, the feedback from my colleagues and family and friends was not great. In fact, it was not a good Thanksgiving because my family was crying real tears. They were like, you showed such promise. How are you coming off track and going, so it was this whole thing. And I was really distressed by it and wasn't sure I'd made the right decisions. But my husband, we've been together since we were 17, knows my heart. And he says, you've wanted to be a healer since you were 6 years old. And since I've known you, does it matter to you whether or not you do that one at a time or a million at a time? And the clarity that he was able to provide by knowing me so well is the kind of mentorship that I continue to seek from him and from others. Coaches. Coaches I engage for sometimes long-term, if I don't do very well getting up to speed on something. But these are very specific engagements. These are people that I connect with that help me think about, respond to, learn skill sets that I would like to have that I do not have. And so it becomes really exciting to be able to use coaching in that very specific way. And again, these are not necessarily cheerleaders and supporters. These are people who are willing to give you feedback, who hold information, insights, and can teach you certain skill sets that you'll need to move ahead. And then last but not least, supporters or sponsors. These sometimes are cheerleaders. They're scanning the environment for you and about you and putting you in places and supporting you to avenues that are meaningful in your progress. So let me go back to the first, determining your own destination, and talk about how these people have helped me. So when Sandro put me through my paces and I found what I thought was my pinnacle role, he put me through another exercise. And that exercise was, now that you know where you want to go, how do you engage with all those people that we just had a conversation about to get you there? And so he had me go back and interview people who held those job sets that I said I might be interested in. He had me ask them 3 questions. What are the skills? What are the experiences? And what are the behaviors that allow you to do that job? What are the skills, experiences, and behaviors that allow you to do that job? And with that, I engaged mentors. I looked at role models. I engaged mentors, coaches, and sponsors to say, what of those things do you think I honestly have? And what do you think, and if I don't have them, what are the things you think I should do in order to close those gaps? So we mapped the gap. And then my coaches, my mentors, and my sponsors helped me think about where I would get those experiences, develop those behaviors, and develop those skills. So I got us from the desk and determining my own destination. I got us to the help that you need or could use in order to apply it. And the last thing was this, which is attitude. And, right, so we talk a lot about gender differences in attitudes and workplace behaviors. And I read an article just a few days ago, actually, that talked about whether or not what we should be seeking to do is change the people or change the environment. I vote the environment, but that's just me. I think that there are attributes, skills, experiences, and behaviors that people have that are not necessarily fully appreciated in the workplace. And a part of what we do in evolving ourselves and helping to evolve our environment in service of patients is by challenging that with attitude. So being willing to be authentic in your thoughts and in your behaviors. Being courageous in pushing back on a system that you want desperately to succeed in, and that pushing back on it may jeopardize those chances. So understanding where you are to the point where a little bit of attitude, by the way, I've been told goes a long way, but having just enough of it and learning to balance your attitude in the workplace so that you're getting a desired effect. And I think that one of the interesting opportunities for us as women in science and medicine is being able to develop the balance in all three of those domains, having a clarity about where we want to go, but not something that's ossified to the point where you're not willing to listen and change. In fact, my mother gave me wisdom that I wasn't prepared for when she gave it to me, but I was raised to never give up. Like, never give up, push, keep going, never give up, you can do anything. But at one point, she looked at me and reminded me that there's a difference between holding on and hanging on. And, learning that subtle difference will be an important opportunity for you, hint, hint, opportunity for you, Freda, which means you're not doing it right now, to really advance your career. So learning that balance of knowing what you want to do, but not being so ossified in it that you don't see other opportunities when they come. Being stuck on who you think would give you help or who could support you moving forward. And having, again, balance being the key. And then last but not least, again, is having that balance of the right attitude and maybe a little more attitude than you need. And I'm going to share this one last story, and then I'll open it up for questions. So my first learning in corporate America, so remember I had been in an academic center. I had also been working on the front lines in mental health. So I have been knocked unconscious on the forensic ward of a hospital. I've been held hostage at Machete Point. I had all kinds of stuff going. Oh yeah, I'm rough and tumble now. So the idea was, I kind of grew up in a very rough and tumble environment in medicine and in science. So I was, kind of ready for a fight, probably more ready for fights than I should have been over time. So I get into my first corporate, kind of big corporate meeting. We're all sitting around the table. And the person next to me does his presentation and then looks at me, and says, "And do you agree?" I said, no, I don't agree, and this is why. And he said, "Well, maybe you don't understand." So let me explain it to you again. Okay, so now I'm mad. Now I'm really mad, but I sat quietly and I listened, and at the end of that, he said, now do you agree? And I said, no, actually, I still don't agree, and this is why. So he leaned over into me and said, maybe we should take this offline. Offline? What does that mean, outside? I started taking my earrings off. I said, you can't scare me like that. I don't intimidate. I mean, everybody at the table was sitting there, their mouths were hanging open. So I go home and I tell, I think I'm gonna get help and support for this terrible attitude and outburst that I had. They were like, too much. Way too much. So after all of the apologies and working together, he and I became really good friends, but it was a great lesson in balance between attitude and good listening and adapting. So again, I encourage you to do your career as you pursue it, wherever you are in it and whatever it is, with great attitude. And I think that women have special and unique opportunities in healthcare, both in the basic science and research, as well as clinical research and clinical care, to really transform the space. We now have the numbers. We now have an opportunity for increasing leadership. And I think we have an opportunity to change and transform a system that is actually designed to save us all. So thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to your questions.